Market Forces webinar, and thanks to everyone for joining us today. My name is Colin Gerard, and I'll be the moderator for today's webinar titled Driving Growth with Customer Intelligence. In this webinar, we're going to understand if customer metrics really can predict same-store sales. Our speakers today include an esteemed guest from Aberdeen Group, Sahir Anand. Sahir is Vice President and Principal Analyst for Retail, Hospitality, and Banking. Joining Sahir are Market Forces Scott Griffith, Vice President of Business Development, and Dr. Cheryl Flank, SVP of Customer Knowledge. Okay, Cheryl, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you to get started.
Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us in our webinar today. We're going to be discussing this intriguing space called customer intelligence, and I think it's a really important topic because corporations are investing in it with the expectation that they will get some ROI, either through developing better products or better experiences, better relationships, more buzz, and ultimately some tie to that bottom line. However, we also know that it's extremely challenging to build a customer intelligence program that really delivers on that promise. And your polls just confirmed that data. Of the data that came in, the things that were most frequently checked, I can see that I've got a large percentage, about 7%, who say they're dissatisfied. I've got another 13% who say I'm somewhat dissatisfied. And then there's another 13% who say they're neutral. No one's saying they love their customer intelligence program today. And then when I look at the barriers and challenges that you've suggested are in place, showing that tie to the ROI is one of them. And another one is lots of data and no insights, which is something that's really interesting. The last one that you were looking at, then a lot of you were talking about, is lack of adequate budget and resources to make it happen. So those are some great challenges, and we hope that from today's webinar, you're going to walk away with some best practices to address exactly those issues and build a really successful program. So here's going to start by talking about some of those external and internal challenges that make it hard to build these programs. And then we're going to follow with some best practices and make it all come to life through some real client case studies. At the end, we'll have some key takeaways and some parting thoughts from Sahir, and we hope we have some great questions from all of you that we can take on the challenge that you pose to us. And with that, let's get started. And I think a great place to begin is with the definition of customer intelligence. What does that phrase really mean? It's something kind of new, starting to emerge, and one very simple definition is that it is the business intelligence you need to delight customers and grow the bottom line. At the end of the day, a customer intelligence program should help consumer-facing businesses make better decisions faster and drive a measurable return. And that's really critical in this fast-moving, competitive world that we all live in. So here, Aberdeen's been conducting research in this space for a long time. What's happening in the world of customer intelligence?
Excellent. Thank you to the Market Force team for having me present today. I would certainly like to thank everyone who's joined the webinar. My name is Sahir Anand. I'm the Vice President Principal Analyst at Aberdeen's Retail, Hospitality, and Banking practice areas. So in really talking about the state of the retail market, the essence of what's really going on today is the fact that for retailers and hospitality companies such as restaurants, the growth focus is back. And as you can see from our data, this was one of our latest surveys that went out roughly about 3-4 months ago. It's called the Aberdeen Business Review, and there were over 200 merchants who responded to the survey. And if it's representative of the overall industry, then you can see for yourself that growth is back, and it's back in a big way. New customer acquisition is on the increase. It's on the upward trend for 8 out of 10 companies that we surveyed, for almost 7.5 out of 10 merchants that we surveyed. Cross-selling and upselling to current customers is a major focus today. And if you look down the list, the interesting part is that not only is the focus on really understanding customer feedback important to companies, at least 6 out of 10 companies that we've surveyed, but also the increase is also it's pertinent in terms of customer service and feedback and support. So call center teams, your customer service representatives in the field, your CSR reps in the headquarters, they definitely have a job at their hand because 7 out of 10 merchants are telling us that they're on the increase as far as the resources that they're dedicating towards customer service and support. And a quick point that I'd add over here is that remember that the increased focus and budget allocation towards customer service and support is essentially a direct result of 2 reasons. One, because customer centricity is top of mind for retailers and hospitality companies, that's definitely the case. So it includes apparel, it includes restaurants, specialty, general merchandise, supermarket, grocery, and other subsegments. But also the fact that cross-channel retailing has expanded. The business being done by online teams, the call center teams, has really increased as a percentage of total revenue from what we are seeing. And lastly, in terms of the focus on loyalty programs, the fact is that loyalty is now becoming more and more important from a customer retention, recency, frequency, and monetary, the RFM metrics. I think they're becoming really important for retailers, and those that are not focusing on loyalty do miss out on a unique opportunity to really engage their customers. On the next slide, what really comes to mind is the number 1 challenge and the top conundrum facing retailers. So what's really happening on the one hand, the growth is back, the focus on the customer has increased from a budgeting standpoint, from a allocation and execution standpoint, but the challenge that really absorbs the mind share of retailers and hospitality organizations such as restaurants is to think about, are we really there as an organization when it comes to the use of timely and adequate customer insights, customer intelligence, before, during, and after the shopping experience or the sales experience? And the challenge is that for 80% of the retailers, the answer is no, a resounding no. The fact is that when Market Force initially said that even the audience on this webinar is highly dissatisfied with their customer intelligence programs, that's reflective of 8 out of 10 retailers, your peers in the industry, that are unhappy with consumer insights. So that's the number 1 conundrum. So what are the external factors that are shaping enhanced consumer insights and customer intelligence programs in retail? Threefold. Number 1, digital retail. Unequivocally, digital retail, the use of online, social, mobile, and the integration of social mobile with voice retailing and in-store traditional retailing is a reality, and that's what retailers and hospitality companies are realizing on a day-to-day basis. That's forcing them to focus on deeper customer data and segmentation and utilizing customer preferences to map their merchandising, their menus, the in-store look and feel, as well as presentation. Secondly, proliferation of retail categories that were unheard of before. So, for example, the drugstores are offering more food categories than ever before. The grocers and the supermarket companies are offering office supplies, unheard of till 5-10 years ago. And let's not even go the Walmart route and the Target route, because those organizations are offering single-touch digital photography and photography printing options, photo printing options through kiosks in their stores, and several other shipping-related options and other consumer-related services, including food. So the fact is that retail is becoming integrated from a category management standpoint and a merchandise management standpoint, and that's putting enormous pressure on retailers to understand the cross-affinity of customers. Thirdly, very important point is what's the millennial generation thinking about? What are these tweens and teens thinking about? And they changed the face of recessionary retailing and recessionary hospitality marketing 2 years ago, because they're the ones who drove the sales at Aeropostale and Buckle and several other prominent retail organizations and merchants. They are the ones who brought back the baby boomers. So this is an extremely powerful generation, digitally acclimatized, very acclimatized with the online social mediums, utilizing online and social to influence their peers. So these are the external drivers that are going to be shaping consumer insights in the next 2 to 3 years. So let's look at how does all this translate into business pressures for retailers and hospitality companies. The fact is that even companies as large as Walmart and Lowe's are grappling with customer data complexities every single day. If you look at Aberdeen data, 6 out of 10 best-in-class retailers identified their inability to access information about their customers during the full buying cycle. So they might have information about customers before, during, or after the sales experience, but not the entire sales cycle. The fact is, even companies like Lowe's, who've got more than 30,000 SKUs, all large retailers that operate 10,000 square feet plus store formats, have multiple channels, quite frankly, they are actually not outperforming the market when it comes to the customer demand accuracy, demand forecast accuracy. Our data shows that demand forecast accuracy is still at 48% in retail, and these companies are dealing with not just millions of customer data records, they're dealing with billions of records. Lowe's is dealing with approximately 3.5 billion customer records on a biweekly basis when it comes to their customer data. So the number one challenge is improving the insights about the customer affinity, preference, segmentation strategies, really grouping them in brackets where you can actually sell, cross-sell, service the customer, more importantly. It's not about selling, it's about customer service. And that insight is lacking in retail today. So at this stage, I'm going to transition the presentation over to Market Force. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sahir, for all those great insights from Aberdeen. I think some very interesting challenges, and we'll take a look at how to maybe address those challenges and some of the best practices. Right now, you spent a lot of time talking about the investments that corporations are making today in customer intelligence to drive growth. Talked about several things that people are doing, and I think there's a very simple growth model that applies to all retail, hospitality, multi-location businesses. And that is the need to grow the bottom line in a process that begins with those customers walking in the door. As Sahir mentioned, corporations are focusing on growth through both new customer acquisitions as well as through cross-sell and upsell to existing customers. And to drive that growth engine, most businesses need lots of traffic, and they need new customers who experience the brand for the first time. But once customers get in that door, they need to have a really great experience that's delivered to them through operational excellence. That means everything from the right merchandise that's attractively put on the shelves, competitive pricing, the timely execution of the transaction, so you're sitting there at the cash register forever, some great sales folks who really know what they're talking about, a great environment. All those are the things that have to be in place day after day, hour after hour, week after week. And you have hundreds or thousands of locations where that has to happen. So we know it's really, really hard to do. But if done well, the reward is satisfied customers who return and refer and spend more money. And at the end of the day, that all boils down into really the only 3 ways a company can grow its business. By increasing the count, or the total number of customers who visit, by increasing frequency, or the how often customers visit, and by increasing the amount the customers spend with you. So if that's the growth model, one of the questions for you has to be, how much potential is there if I invest in customer intelligence? Market Forces research typically finds that a customer intelligence program using best practices is going to generate a 1 to 5% increase in same-store sales and between a 3x and 12x increase in recommendations. Now, that can mean a ton of money on the line. And yet, given all that potential, it's pretty hard to make it happen. As Sahir pointed out, companies struggle to get value from their customer data and pick the things that are actually going to fuel the promised growth from customer intelligence. Remember, he said from Aberdeen's research that 80% of corporations make inadequate use of customer data, and it looks like most of you are pretty unhappy with your customer intelligence programs today. So Scott, if there's all this potential in the marketplace, what makes it so difficult for corporations to sort this all out?
Well, Cheryl, in our experience in talking with a number of large retailers and multi-unit organizations in the restaurant and hospitality spaces, the struggle really starts with the org structure. We've got a bunch of different parts of the organization that are owning different parts of the model that you've been describing in terms of increasing the count, frequency, and amount. In our client base, we've typically got a situation where marketing's in charge of driving the traffic, so they're in charge of that first portion of the puzzle. They got to drive the count in the door. But then when it comes down to the second step of actually executing and delivering a great experience that are going to make people come back, that lies in the operations department. So once there's people in the doors, there's a little extra noise because now we've got two departments working together, and often these two departments will even have differing goals and objectives. When you start to look at that, I mean, for instance, a marketing department tasked with driving people in might be promising great customer service. An operations department, on the other hand, might actually have a different metric, which is reducing labor cost, and you can see how those two contradict each other. So kind of really digging into that data and making sense of it to try to figure out the happy balance that has departments working in sync can be a definite art form. So you put all of this together, and what you get is a view of a lot of information coming in from a lot of different channels. Most organizations are getting data feeds from their panels, from industry benchmarks, information back from customers, from call centers. They've got their sales data and traffic counts coming in. And this cocktail can be very hard to dissect. It's really siloed as well because we've got these different departments owning different data stores. So it becomes very hard to do. When that data becomes siloed by different organizations, even within the same company, making better decisions faster becomes nearly impossible. So it presents quite a challenge. So that's kind of the broader, high-level, sweeping statement. And then as we dig in on this, I want to kind of make it practical and deal with everyday, realistic situations of what's happening out there in the field. Let's take this example where you have a multi-location business that is looking to enter a new market. And as they do, the brand decides to enter that new market and they find that same-store sales are much lower than anticipated. So that's kind of the finding. We've got lower sales. The second one that I'd like to highlight is when a brand finds that their same-store sales decline markedly after the initial excitement of opening a new store. So two things that might happen when you enter a new market, and in each case there could be a number of reasons why this is actually occurring if you kind of peel back the onion a little bit. In the situation of the declining sales or low opening, it could be that marketing didn't create awareness amongst consumers, so maybe you didn't get the traffic that you were anticipating because you didn't create the buzz. Or maybe it's operations execution where the store is not executing the way it should or similar to other stores within that brand, and it's turning consumers off, so you're not seeing that repeat traffic. Perhaps the brand itself and what it offers just isn't appealing in that market, so folks just aren't resonating with that message and they're not caring about what that brand has to offer in that new location. And lastly, it could be that the competitive set's entirely different and what you've got to offer in your old markets versus your new markets isn't quite as appealing and as attractive as what competitors are out there doing. So those are four fundamentally different situations that could all be the possible cause of the actual lower sales than anticipated. So it becomes very difficult because each of those situations requires an entirely different treatment. So Cheryl, why don't you talk a little bit more about how you can pick your priorities and kind of figure out what the best course of action might be?
Thanks, Scott. I love your phrase, they all require a different course of treatment. Every one of those reasons are different. And once you disentangle it, the decision that you're going to make is going to be very much affected by that root cause analysis. So it's important to be able to get to that. So we want to capture and give to you some of the best practices, and as we looked across Aberdeen's research, across our own work with our clients, we really found 3 things that are a best practice. And I think as you go back and remember what the challenges are that Aberdeen and Sahir talked about, it is the need to create overall consumer insight, to improve data and insights on the consumer side of the business during the entire process, to improve the speed of access to relevant data, and to provide customer relevant information regardless of the channel. So if we think about that, there's 3 best practices that we think will help you with those challenges. The first is a technology platform that creates a single customer view by integrating all that pertinent data that we've been talking about. The second is analytics that identifies what matters most. And the third is to really look at top grading the organization and making some of those tough decisions that are going to drive accountability into the organization. So let's take a look at all of those and begin with technology. So a great technology platform will put the power of customer intelligence data right at your fingertips. Again, we've used this phrase, make better decisions faster. Some corporations have chosen to build their own. Others have chosen to buy an existing platform. But for all of these corporations, there's 3 important things to think about when you buy or build a platform. The first is the ability to integrate all these data streams we've been discussing. That's going to include performance-related data like mystery shop and customer feedback, third-party data like social media or traffic counts. And don't forget how important that social media data is becoming, as Sahir pointed out, as one of those external influencers that's really making it difficult to get our arms around our consumers. And then you've got your own financial data like same-store sales or loyalty card data. The more data you get, the better, as long as it's a viable lens to view your business and your customers. The second thing to look at is the ability to create the right data views for each function or user and enable their decision making. The last thing you want is people messing around in the data and wasting their time. So you don't want to set up things that aren't important to them and don't instantly give them what they need to manage the business. And that's the third point. At the end of the day, according to one of those challenges, it is that instant access, and the technology platform has to quickly lead users to the right actions and track the right results. Now I'd like to move on to analytics. And I've got this kind of interesting slide up here. And the big point I want to make is how important it is for the analytics process to go from the complex to the simple. Tying these data streams together is complicated and very sophisticated work. You could think that it might be really simple. And because people think it's simple, we run into situations where someone in an organization tries to do a quick and dirty analysis to find the tie between financials and some data set. Typically, they'll put sales in one column, satisfaction in another, run a correlation analysis, and they almost never find the tie. That then starts the organization questioning whether the investment in customer intelligence has a real ROI. So that's really frustrating. So there's a lot of complexity in the data that needs to be accounted for if you'll let it. It's rich. It'll tell you a fantastic story. Lots of things to account for. How big is the store? If it has a bigger footprint and more merchandise on the shelf, it's going to have higher sales. If you have 5 competitors in a 3-mile radius instead of 1, that's going to affect sales. And why is it that some customers found that the wait time, the exact same wait time, was painful, and others thought it was just fine? And then sometimes you might find that sales isn't the best metric to look at. Maybe you're supposed to be looking at conversion rate, and that's a better metric. So our clients who have best practices either have an internal analytics team or outsource analytics for these complex data sets so they can get the rich insights that they need. At the end of the day, I think this picture is gorgeous. And Dr. Bernard Lefang and I could have a drink after work and have this wonderful, scintillating conversation about all the great findings. But at the end of the day, we know that CEOs who need the bottom line and operators who need to know what to do next won't find it such a great picture. So here's a couple of tips for winnowing down the data. One we found very effective is a chart that we call the Big Bang Index, where you get the biggest bang for your buck. It's divided into 2 sections. On the right are the key behaviors that have the biggest impact on customer sat, and on the left are those that don't matter as much. On the bottom are the things where the organization performs relatively poorly or inconsistently, and on the top are the things the organization does really well. So the beauty of this is that what becomes immediately apparent are the things in the orange box. Those are the ones that matter most to customers and where the organization doesn't perform very well. That's the best place to start driving your ROI. a big bang for your buck going from the complex to a simple understanding. And you'll get lots of kudos for doing that kind of simplification, because it's really an immense relief to walk into an operator whose hair's on fire and tell him you've got 5 things to work on instead of 50. That can be very important. Another quick tip is how to create a punchline. Take a key behavior, figure out what it's worth. In this example, 79% of customers experienced or reported that they had a really lovely, inviting atmosphere, and 80% of those would definitely recommend. The 20% who said wasn't so great, only 30% would recommend. The punchline, a 50-point boost in recommendation if the location can deliver an inviting atmosphere. This is just a visual of how to simplify data and start to tell a story that gets the organization behind you and really helps them understand how important that one thing can be to creating buzz and financial return. So let's move to that really cool next topic, top grading. And Scott's going to lead us in talking about that.
Sure. As you saw in the last slide, Cheryl did a really nice job of illustrating the difference between those executing on creating that inviting atmosphere and those who weren't. You can see the dramatic difference it had on the customer's perception of the business overall, and how executing on that factor can make such an impressive impact. So taking a look at that at a macro scale through a wider lens, basically, and looking at performance across any metrics that you have. So regardless of whether you're looking at your survey data, your shop data, your call center data, or in the best case, a blend of as many data sources as you can. If you can stack and rank the performance and start to create brackets with your organization so that you can see who the real A, B, and C performers are, you can also start to look at the sales differences that equates to. What this helps to do is create the financial picture that typically the CEO and the CFO and the COO and CMO need to see in order to justify initiatives and projects. So as we start to further understand our business, we also start to create the case study that really puts the meat behind a customer intelligence initiative. So taking a look at that, really what you're starting to see is similar to in the example we talked about earlier. Different situations require different treatments. You've got different types of players. So first I want to talk a little bit about A players. Now, A players are the team members within your organization. They're running a tight ship. These people typically are very committed and engaged with the business and the brand. They're definitely ambassadors for everything that the brand stands for. So they've got a certain way of doing things that is leading to successful results, both financially and operationally. They tend to have all the prerequisite skills and also a willingness to learn and go above and beyond. So very receptive audience. They're receptive to new ideas, and when you're piloting new programs or initiatives, typically often your A players are the first ones in line. They've also worked hard to earn your support by continually executing. So this group of people can really be pioneering and leading an organization to great success. This group of people is also your best candidate for mentorship. So as you look at how you can leverage A players, one of the best ways is to team them up with some of the players in your organization that would fall into the B category. So as we move to the next slide, the difference that we see over and over and time again kind of comes in two different shades. Your B performers, they're really only one step away from that top group. They're so close, but often the missing link will be just a little bit of consistency. So while, for instance, an A player might be operating every shift the same way with no exceptions, a B player might actually have a couple days a week where things aren't going as planned, or a couple types of circumstances that are still causing challenges. So helping those B players identify what some of those priorities are can be the key and the fundamental difference between whether or not they can become an A player or not. Within this group, they often have the willingness to learn as well and the right attitude. And the challenge comes into, what do I need to focus on today to make a difference in my business? So providing that level of detail and information along with the mentorship and leadership provided by some of your A players can help them achieve that consistency, which is key to their growth. Now, after knowing where to focus and applying that consistently, there comes a different group of people within the organization that have a lot more challenges and a lot more struggles. Every brand has a different gap or range between their A and C performers, but there's always a difference. this group of people can be people who are struggling just because they're new and they don't necessarily have the requisite skills yet. In that case, the best strategy is coaching and continuous reinforcement until they achieve a higher level of performance. The second set can be a group of people that have challenges with commitment and attitude. In this case, it's a situation where even with the right coaching, training, mentorship, and support, you're still not seeing the change and improvement that you're looking for. Some of them will claim to know it already, and they can consume a lot of the energy of your territory managers, your area managers, and things like that. In that case, the situation becomes quite clear that in an organization you can really only be as good as your C players are. So the most successful organizations are finding successful strategies to help those people find a better place in life that fits more for them, and also definitely giving the people that are just in need of coaching a chance to perform. So taking a look at that, it really transitions into kind of a three-step approach where, as an organization, if you really want to influence your performance via customer intelligence, the first thing to do is to know where you stand. So how many A players do I have, how many Bs, and how many Cs? And how is that relationship changing over time? Am I slowly getting more As and more Bs and fewer Cs, or am I actually seeing that reverse trend? So being able to quantify that and understand that in your organization using the data that you've got is a very key activity. The second is really to do the math and to understand what is the difference in financial performance of a C player versus an A player. So how much is it worth to make the change or to climb that ladder or to get to that next level of performance? This is the case study that's required by every good CEO and CFO to back an initiative like this. They need to see that this results in real business change, real business performance change. So doing that math is absolutely critical, and there's an art and a science to that, and that's something that our group has kind of perfected over time. And the reason we've perfected it is the third bucket here, pick the right challenges. Within an organization, any retailer, restaurateur, hospitality industry pro will recognize that not all challenges have the same payback. If you look at a bunch of different things that you're measuring, some might be problem resolution or the speed of service or your ability to meet customers' complex needs. Taking a look at some of these different attributes, what we can start to dissect is how much performance will pay back on those particular attributes and when it stops paying. So if you take a look at anyone in isolation, you might end up finding that there's a few variables where the bang for your buck or the payback is much greater than other variables. It helps you isolate your priorities and pick what's most important. And that's, as Cheryl kind of alluded to, the way that you get from the 50 priorities down to the 3 or 4 or 5 that really matter. And that can be incredibly beneficial and a huge time saver for your organization because you know your team's all focused on what's important to them. So that's kind of a simple three-step process. Cheryl, let's make this a little bit more real. Why don't you get us started and talk about how we're making this happen in different client situations?
That'll be great. Let's start with one in the restaurant industry. So our first client case study is for a rapidly growing fast casual chain. Now this chain knew that they were going to grow, and they knew that they would face some challenges along the way. The difficulty of maintaining that brand's promise and the consistency of that brand with that high growth just absolutely slapped that CEO square in the face. And as you can imagine, he's very, very committed to that brand. So the business challenge was how to manage consistent operational excellence in a time of high growth and create a great experience for customers. Our client did something really unusual. No marketing, no advertising, all growth based on recommendations. Dollars are instead allocated to creating and measuring operational excellence. So the approach actually includes several different methodologies that you see there. There's mystery shop, customer sat, text analytics, and some call center data. And then, as Scott just alluded, they top grade the organization, but they do it to identify the best players. So if we look at best practices for the company, absolute commitment from the CEO. Without his vision and without his passion, operational excellence would be just another box that somebody checks on a long list of to-dos. Second, relentless focus. Their numbers show the highest consistency of execution of any organization that we work with. Third, they top grade with a keen eye on the A players, and they put their money where their mouth is. They reward the best performers by splitting a huge pool of money among the crew members who are responsible for delivering that excellence. So those dollars go down to the front line, and they actually get more money from that program than they actually do from their paychecks. Finally, technology and analytics identify performance gaps and lets them know what customers think, and they tie everything to the financials. Great best practices. What are the results? Expansion, as I said, from 500 to 1,200 locations. And remember that I told you that growth has to be fueled by recommendations? 60% of all customers report coming to this company because of personal recommendation. They also know that delivering a really, truly exceptional experience, a great one, like a 5 on a 5-point scale instead of a 4, results in a 3.5 difference in that recommendation level. And then finally, we've been able to show a truly statistically significant difference in transaction size based on whether they're an A or a B performer. So those are some great learnings from this particular case study about how best practices lead to some real results. Scott, why don't you tell us another one?
Sure. In this case, just taking a look at a major retail brand, big box retail stores across North America, and they're stuck in a situation that's very similar to kind of the usual test case that we talked about at the beginning of this presentation, where it's not necessarily an absence of data that was their challenge. They had a lot of data, and it was from a lot of different sources like customer surveys and feedback and panel studies and things like that, call center data. Unfortunately, all of this data was housed in disconnected systems and managed by different departments with different goals and metrics and tactics tied to those particular pieces of data. So it became very complex and time-consuming, if not impossible, to actually pull that data together in any sort of a meaningful way so that they could learn from the big picture of what it was all telling them. So the first situation was, okay, we got to tackle the root cause issue, which is we can't really do much with this data until we bring it together. So the approach was to combine all of that data, the call center, the survey, any customer touch points, as well as the transaction data, so that we could isolate the top priorities that led to both high satisfaction and high sales. Really, it's not necessarily about making people more satisfied if for some reason that's disconnected from the financial objectives of the organization. The two had to be in sync with both. So in this particular case, in order to get all of the different departments working together in a meaningful way, it definitely started with the CEO and C-suite commitment to the initiative. Definitely they saw the light at the end of the tunnel, so to speak, by bringing all that information together. And in reality what's happened is by integrating those data streams, including merging sales and transaction data, they were able to start to use analytics to understand what matters most to impact both that sales and that satisfaction. And then lastly, once they knew the strategic outcomes and answers, they were able to create a focused communication strategy to get that messaging out to the field on a regular basis so that every store general manager knew what those priorities were, knew where they stood, and knew what they needed to do to act on them. So taking a look at some of the results of that, there was a significant change to the labor scheduling practices to better accommodate customer needs in specific departments at specific times, and that can only be learned by going to the level of detail of analytics, of looking at all these different sources. The result for them was an increase in 26% in top box ratings for customer service, so they saw the first lever being pushed up, which was the service. Secondly, consumer spending increased by an average of $156, a 52% increase in transaction size on a per transaction rate. Now, you roll a finding like that across a massive big box retail chain, and you can imagine the impact it has on the bottom line. It's definitely proving the ROI of these types of initiatives. So, Cheryl, I think you probably have one more up your sleeve. Why don't you take over?
I do have one more up my sleeve, and I think that's a really great and important point you just made, Scott, about it's this ongoing incremental improvement that's going to drive change. And when you have hundreds or thousands of locations, those add up to really big numbers really fast. So some great points there. This last one is about a company that we all know and love. It's GameStop. And they have a really, really unique challenge. They're a brick-and-mortar retail business, lots and lots of stores, they're everywhere. But they have to transition to the digital world. At the same time, that brick-and-mortar world is really important because one fabulous asset exists there, and that's their associates. So customers come to GameStop to have access really to the passion and the experience that those GameStop associates show every single day. So the business challenge became how to better leverage those associates with the time that they have in the store with those customers. The approach included customer satisfaction, text analytics, and they also included their market segmentation data that came from their CRM database. And remember that Sahir talked about how important that CRM database is becoming, and also the importance of teens and tweens. And so as you can imagine, in the gaming world, there's lots and lots and lots of teens and tweens who end up at GameStop and are becoming advocates for that company. So we focused all of their analysis to understand loyalty and also conversion rates. So here's a little bit about what they do. Third time you've seen this, Scott showed it to you, I showed it to you. It's that CEO level commitment to the program. It's absolutely critical to success. Second, and something I really love about GameStop, is that they can quickly adjust their sales team to focus on doing what the data says to do. So really interestingly, early in their program, Market Force showed them 5 drivers of their business that needed to be reinforced. But those 5 drivers were not the same 5 that GameStop had originally communicated and trained on within the organization. So much to their credit and my delight, they were very proactive in changing their training program to focus on those new key drivers. And doing that, they experienced a 5% increase in their loyalty metric in about 6 months. That is absolutely great. Finally, we do some really interesting work to understand what their different market segments experience at GameStop. And that's has created some really, really interesting opportunities for GameStop to pursue around driving conversion rates. I'm a parent of a gamer. I don't know very much, and when I go to GameStop, I need a different experience than if I take my son, and he's got it all down. So there's a really interesting way to work with people differently in the stores. Results, 5% increase on their key loyalty metric, as I mentioned before, 50% conversion rate. They're fantastic at suggesting a game and people buying the game that's suggested. And finally, they can document a 4% difference for growth based on operational excellence. Exceptional results for an exceptional company. And by the way, a little plug here, Mike Dezura, who is GameStop's SVP of Retail Operations, will be presenting the GameStop story at Aberdeen's Retail Summit in June. So don't forget to check that out. All right, let's just step back for a minute and reflect on what we've learned about customer intelligence best practices. Scott, I'm going to let you take it away.
Absolutely. Thanks, Cheryl. I really want to get back to basics because at the end of the day, we're really trying to grow businesses out here, and that's the ultimate goal that we're tasked with every day. And the activities that we do need to be connected to that in order to maintain their importance and relevance inside the organization. So really, when it comes down to it, there's only 3 ways to grow the business. We have to grow the count of people that come in, the frequency that they are able to come in and purchase, and the amount that they're going to spend when they do come in. So taking a look at those objectives, if you start to reverse engineer and connect all of the measurements and activities that you're doing with your organization to those goals, you start to see some of these fantastic results. The second point is, in terms of customer intelligence best practices and getting to that clearly documented ROI, we really want to make sure that the data that we have will support same-store sales growth, transaction size, conversion rate, and recommendations. So we're looking at satisfaction not in isolation, just doing a standard CSAT program or a standard customer recovery program, but we're looking at that in correlation with sales growth, transaction growth, recommendation, and all of these metrics that tie back to that count, frequency, and amount. So those are 2 things that definitely, if you keep your eye on the prize and do that well, it will keep your customer intelligence program very healthy. So Cheryl, why don't you share some more findings?
Well, I think as we talked about earlier, there were 3 major best practices that came together as we looked at trying to solve for the challenges that Sahir mentioned, some of the challenges that you showed us in the polls, and that we see as we're out there speaking with clients today. And we know that those are a technology platform that integrates that data and helps different levels of management make better decisions faster, the analytics to understand what matters most, and then, as Scott walked you through, top-grading that organization to create accountability and systems of change management within the organization. Can't emphasize enough that organizations like Market Force can measure all day long, but the actions that need to be taken belong with you. And so there needs to be those systems of accountability in place to make the change actually happen. Finally, as we looked at our case studies, one thing became very clear, and these sort of emerged independently, and that's the importance of that CEO and the commitment that he or she is going to have for the organization around customer intelligence. Executives have to believe in the value of customer intelligence programs, and they've got to help create the vision for the corporation and what it's going to be like as they drive towards really delighting their customers. That vision has got to include budget, and people, and communication. It's got to be a true investment in success, and they've got to be behind it. We just can't emphasize enough how critical that is. We've given you a lot to think about, so I'd like to hand it back to Sahir and let him do a final wrap-up for us.
Thank you, and I think great job, Market Force team, in presenting so many interesting points, as well as, most importantly, some case studies with results that demonstrate the importance of in-depth customer analysis and applying those insights to every operational area in your retail or in your merchant business. But in summary, I think in retail, as I say, one of the easiest things or one of the givens is that you exist because of the customer, and your lifeline is because of the customers. And sometimes what is given and what is assumed becomes one of the most complex things to handle. And that's the story of the industry we are in. And another key point that keeps coming back to haunt us in the retail and hospitality industry is the question around growth. We saw the recessionary times taking away so much of same-store sales and really tanking our bottom line. And now that we are back to achieving some growth again, the biggest complexity that we are surrounded by is how much more customer data to deal with. And that data, and the source of that data, is not just point of sale, it's not just the shipping data, it's not just your suppliers' trading partner data, it is your channel data coming from your call centers, customer feedback loops, through your CSRs, through your field reps, mobility, AIDC data, so a myriad of sources. So what really, at the end of the day, it comes down to is three things. How clean is your customer data? Secondly, how centralized and how well-rounded is your customer data in terms of covering all sources of customer information? So having that one view of the customer and one version of truth. Thirdly is how effectively is your organization measuring the full buying cycle of the customer, before, during, and after the customer service or sales experience. And most importantly, how effectively is the CEO owning the customer, and how effectively is he or her and their objective really permeating down into the organization in terms of customer ownership. Customer cannot be owned by the CEO, has to be accounted for by the CEO, but has to be owned by every single employee in the organization. That's what is customer centricity. That's when customer intelligence and customer data really comes into play. Several organizations, department stores, apparel organizations, general merchandise organizations in the recent past have shown that when the customer sits right in the core, the customer insight is delivered effectively into the stores, into the channels, into the merchandising department, the marketing department, and the supply chain in a real-time fashion, improving the time to information and time to access. That's what is defined as true customer centricity. So I'm going to leave you with those thoughts. Invest in customer centricity. It's not just about the customer service aspect. It actually starts much before customer service. I'll leave you with those thoughts. Hand it back over to Market Force. Have a great day.
Thank you, Sahir. That's Colin again, the moderator, and we've got a couple questions that have come in. So we still have a few minutes. I'd like to see if we can get a couple of these answered. The first question that came in is, we're a small retailer and we've been discussing implementing a new customer intelligence program, but we don't know where to start and we have to prove ROI to get the budget dollars approved. Any advice?
Scott, I think I'll have you take that one. That's too big for me. Scott, are you there? Okay, I'll take that one.
Yes, I am actually, Cheryl. Sorry, I was just on mute.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a great question, and we did present a lot of different sources of customer information. So when trying to pick a place to start that's bite-sized and achievable and will get you where you need to go, it can be a daunting decision. But with that kind of case study in mind, where you're a retailer and you're looking to kind of get started with a program like this, a great way to start is a CSAT initiative where you can reach out to your customers on a regular basis, maybe at the time of transaction or using one of our research panels. That was going to give you a perspective as to what they see as most important, because you can really kind of drive some of those analytics from that information. As well, customer satisfaction data is nicely tied to sales information, so that you can start to merge some of your accounting data in with that, which further reinforces what those priorities are. So it's often a really good place to start.
I agree, and I'll add on to that when you have CSAT data, you can construct the questionnaire to align with some of your CRM. If you've got a CRM database and you're doing market segmentation, you can get some of those questions embedded in the CSAT questionnaire and start to tie segments to some of that data as well. So there's a nice way to expand that particular data set to kind of have tentacles that reach out to many of the other data sets in your system. Colin, do we have any more questions?
We actually do, and I want to clarify. There's a couple people that are on that are wanting to ensure that they'll be able to have this presentation. So we are recording this, and I will make sure that it is available for anyone who has requested it. The next question that I have is, what is the importance of social media, and where should that live within the organization? For an organization that is just starting to look at social media, what are some of the key priorities to focus on?
I'll take that one, and then maybe, Scott, I'll have you speak right after me about taking the conversation offline. But I think one of the things that's interesting about social media, different clients treat it different ways. One of our clients really is hands-off. They monitor, they watch, they try to understand, and they're looking for anything bad that's percolating. So they're very much managing the press and things like that. And the other thing that's true about social media data, it is almost never at the store level. It's almost always at the brand level, tends to be a marketing function, but it can give you some really, really great insights into what people are thinking about, what they're saying about the brand. It can be used in lots of different ways. I think the interesting thing is to try, when something starts to percolate that's bad news, is to get that conversation offline and to try to deal with it away from the public. And Scott, maybe you can talk a little bit about how MarketForce does that.
Sure. A lot of our clients have had great success within the last year and a half or so at basically using some technology to go online and scrub and look for those circumstances where there's an opportunity to interact and intercept an issue, especially if it's an issue or problem that needs to be taken care of. So the best practice is to grab those people and invite them to provide more details about their experience. So it's not necessarily jumping into a conversation and trading facts on a blog. It would be to actually invite them to use a closed channel that you use traditionally to deal with customer concerns and customer issues. That way that conversation is taken private, and you can learn more specifically about where that happened, when it happened, why it happened, so that you can take the right action to resolve the issue with the customer, and also to take the action with the crew to make sure it doesn't happen again.
Yeah, and the other thing I'll add in terms of technology that can be really helpful is starting to use text analytics or cloud tagging of the words or some things like that that will help you start to get your arms around what are the themes that are starting to emerge. And if any of you haven't seen the impact of a bad customer experience, don't forget to look up United Guitar on YouTube and watch a very funny video.
Okay, I have one last question we're going to try to get to. When you have learned about, what have you learned about providing financial incentives for achievement of CSAT metrics?
Oh, boy, is that a loaded question. I'll start, and then please, Scott or Sahir, if you want to jump in.
Yeah, absolutely.
A bunch of our clients actually do incent, and I will say that our most successful programs have some teeth in it, where there is both punishment and there's reward for doing extremely well. For one of our clients, and it's a huge, enormous client with multi-thousands of locations, the organization compensates all the way to the CEO based on performance on actually mystery shop metrics. In the other example that I showed you, compensation is absolutely important. So it becomes a huge incentive to focus the organization on exactly what needs to be done and to know that it matters enormously and that you put your money where your mouth is. The thing that can happen is you want to be very, very, very careful that you have lots of systems in place to ensure there's no gaming of the system, and that you control questions about the data. The data has to have really great integrity, or people start to question why they didn't get their bonus this week. Scott, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with,
to push us along here.
with your statements there, and in reality, there are some challenges associated with it. As a result, I ended up putting together a white paper on it to help guide clients through the process of designing their comp plan and connecting it to CSAT, because there's certain integral metrics that are really useful metrics and good guideposts that aren't as susceptible to gaming, and if you stick with those metrics, you can have a very successful program.
Great.
And one other point that I wanted to add, Scott, if you don't mind, Sahir, I think it's really a quandary, right? So if you think about it, from one perspective, the CEO and the C-level executives in retail think that why should we incentivize CSAT? It should be a given. It should be part of your job responsibility, and that you should, as an associate or an employee, or even a manager or any officer in the company, you should be judged on your performance based on CSAT. That should be something as a normal day-to-day task. That's one view. Our data shows that 6 out of 10 companies that have actually instituted CSAT as a metric have incentivized it, and I believe, my own personal belief is that it should be incentivized along with mystery shop and revenue and customer feedback, other customer feedback metrics. Because at the end of the day, if you're providing your employees with growth and development, CSAT should be one of the growth and development criteria, and it should be incentivized. It's a great incentive. It does promote the 360-degree view of the customer, which is really important to the organization, and it creates the culture of developing a well-rounded view of the customer in the organization. So when you have a new employee coming in, the new employee knows what to expect, and that they don't make generalizations about customer service, which tends to happen very often in organizations. So it should be a cultural mandate to really accept CSAT and to incentivize CSAT on an ongoing basis.
Thank you, Sahir. So with that, I'd like to thank our speakers and everyone in the audience for taking time to join us today. Have a great rest of your week.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.